Greg, one of the perennial questions that I'm just fascinated with is God's foreknowledge. God is omniscient, which means he knows everything, which means he must know every true proposition or every true statement, which includes the future. So the question is, has God so settled the future that we are all just automatons? What is the thinking behind that?
Well, traditionally, at least in the West, there's been a couple options on that. I mean, on the one hand, you have those who are in the Augustinian or the Calvinist tradition who hold that, God settles the future, and yet in such a way, they always say, that we're still morally responsible for what we do. God settles the future by predestining it, and he foreknows it because he predestines it. So that's one option.
He causes it.
Well, he causes it, but in such a way that we're still responsible for our own action. And there's a big mystery there, obviously, and obviously that's not the view I hold to. Then there's another strand that comes more from the Arminian tradition, from Arminius, who was an opponent of Calvin's. And they hold that God doesn't predestine the future, at least not all the future. He just knows how it's all going to pan out. And therefore they stress that we're free even though God foreknows it. And some within that camp would say that God simply foreknows what's going to happen. He just sees it all there, but it doesn't really give him any advantage in changing the future. And then others, especially those who come from Molina, and it's called Molinism, they would argue that God knows not only what's going to happen, but all the things that could happen, and he chooses from among all the things that could happen, that which he wants to happen. So he doesn't, in a sense, he predestines it, but he predestines on the basis of how he sees we would have acted in every conceivable situation. You follow that?
Yeah, but I think you're distinguishing between could and would, and the Molinist position is would. What would free agents do if given any sort of circumstance?
It's all certain to God. God knows exactly. If you were born as a pharaoh in 1346 BC in Egypt, he knows exactly how you'd behave.
Under every circumstance.
In every circumstance. And so he looks at all the possible Roberts there are out there in every possible world and chooses the Robert that he wants in combination with the Greg that he wants in combination with the world that he wants. So he gets the best of all possible worlds given how free agents act in every conceivable universe.
And that's the
Molinism.
Molinism. Okay.
So you've got the Calvinist view, you've got the predestination, simple foreknowledge view,
just knows the
just
future.
Knows it. The Molinist view where he knows all the
woods,
the wood counterfactuals. And then you have another view, and this is the view that I espouse, and it's called the open view of the future, or sometimes it's called open theism. And this view holds that God is omniscient. God knows all of reality exactly as it is, with perfect accuracy. But part of reality are possibilities. So possibilities are real, and God therefore knows possibilities as possibilities. So the future, to some degree at least, is not just a matter of what will come to pass. It's also, to some degree, a matter of what may and may not come to pass. And to the extent that God's given humans and angelic beings free will, this view holds that the future, to that degree, is a matter of what may or may not come to pass. It's not a matter of what will and will not come to pass.
So God is still omniscient in that he knows everything that is logically possible to know, but it is not logically possible to know something that is not yet settled.
The view that I espouse is called the open view of the future, or sometimes it's just called open theism. And in a nutshell, the view says this, that the future isn't out there as a settled reality for God to know, at least not exhaustively so. Rather, we agree that God is omniscient. God knows all things. God knows reality exactly as reality is with perfect accuracy. But where this view is distinct is it holds that part of the furniture of reality, if you will, is our possibilities. That when God created this world, because he created it with some free agents, the future is to some degree a matter not of what will or will not come to pass, but rather to some degree a matter of what may and may not come to pass. And that's what's real. And since God's omniscient, God knows the possibilities as possibilities. And so the future to that degree is open. It's open to possibilities. So whereas like Molinism would say that God knows what you would do in every conceivable situation, the open view would say, no, that's not part of the furniture of reality. God knows what you may and may not do in any conceivable situation.
Now, this to me sounds entirely rational.
I agree with you.
And this may surprise you to say that. I know you would. But why has this position become so argumentative, controversial among your co-theologians?
Well, anytime you have a view that's not traditional, it's going to, raise the ire of some
But there's
people.
got to be a reason. What is the fundamental driving reason that if I'm a traditional Christian theologian, that I am really upset
Sure.
with what you just said?
Okay. There's two fundamental reasons. One is that they interpret Scripture to teach that, and now we can have a Bible dispute on that. I would argue that the Bible actually teaches my view. The other thing that really motivates, energizes this issue, I think, is that there's a fundamental assumption that if God doesn't know the future as a settled reality, exhaustively as a settled reality, then God can't promise to bring good out of evil. Things might happen to you that take God by surprise. And so there's this assumption that God loses a providential advantage if he doesn't foreknow the future as a settled reality. Now, I think that
may make being God more fun.
Well, yeah, see, it takes away the adventuresome side of God, and I think that's an important attribute of God, the risk-taking, adventurous God. But on the other hand, I think it's really a mistake to think that God can't come through on his promises to bring good out of evil simply but because he knows the future to some degree as a possibility. You and I worry about the future to the extent that we are not certain of what's going to happen. To the extent that we have to think about possibilities as opposed to a certainty, we have to spread our intelligence thin to cover the possibilities. But see, if God has unlimited intelligence, which all parties in this discussion agree
with,
then God could anticipate each and every one of a trillion possibilities to the trillionth power, each and every one as though it was the only possibility. Because God doesn't have to spread his intelligence thin to cover the possibilities. So for a God of unlimited intelligence, there's no functional difference between anticipating a possibility and anticipating a certainty. And so I believe that it's really a mistake on the part of some to get worried with the idea that God anticipates a partly open future. They're really, without knowing it, they're limiting God. And if you just have confidence in God's intelligence, you don't need to worry about the fact that some of the future is open to him.
And why does that concern people if the future is open? That means God can't deliver his promises? That's what they think?
Yeah, well, you have verses like Romans 8:28 that says, in all things God's working together for the better for those who love the Lord and are called according to his purposes. And what a lot of Christians think is this: well, look, if he doesn't foreknow the future as a settled reality, then he can't follow through on that promise. How does he know that he can bring good out of evil? And what I would say is this, that whatever happens, God has been anticipating that very possibility from the foundation of the world as though it had to happen. Just like the tradition says. It's just that God is so smart. He doesn't need to foreknow it as a certainty in order to anticipate it as though it was a certainty.
He knows all the possibilities.
He knows every possibility.
And does he statistically weight them to which is more logical or likely?
If part of the furniture of reality are probabilities, if probabilities are objectively true, then an omniscient God would know exactly what those probabilities are. And they would be changing as time flows. It becomes more and more probable that this will happen or that will happen. And so God knows exactly how likely something is.
It would seem that could make for a richer universe, a richer fabric of reality.
I don't, the traditional view of time as a frozen thing, there's all facts are eternally settled. That strikes me as among other philosophical problems, boring. There's no creativity in that. There's no adventure. There's no risk. The Bible teaches that we're made in the image of God. And part of what makes life full for us is a sense of adventure and risk, and that we genuinely contribute to reality. We have say-so. We genuinely make a difference. And it strikes me that if everything I will ever do in the future and that you will ever do in the future is eternally settled, the facticity is out there from all eternity, well, then there's nothing that the flow of time really contributes. It's just all settled. And it's like God watching a movie for the 10 billionth time. There's nothing of interest that happens. I find the open view to be a lot more biblical, a lot more true to our experience, but also a lot more beautiful. It makes our life really significant.